Good morning, good afternoon. I'm very pleased to welcome you all to our webinar on Chinese investments, financial institutions, and what we have learned from the Chinese experiences in the Belt and Road initiative. We are very pleased to welcome you all. I think we will have I hope also we will have a very nice discussion on the topic. And I'm also particularly pleased to be here with my dear colleagues, Mrs. Leong See Wong and Mr. Miljan Radunovic. We are all part of CHERN, China in Europe Research Network. And I met Miljan Radunovic as part of the different activities that we have held. So let's move to the next slide. I will just tell you briefly about who we are and what we will discuss today. We'll tell you about the project. I will also give more insights into our distinguished speakers. And thank you very much, Leong See Wong and Miljan Radunovic, to be here with us today. They are both experts on the topic, and they will share three key topics: lessons learned, the key obstacles, and some missed opportunities, and how we can work further together as it relates to Chinese investments in our region. As I mentioned, I really hope you have a dynamic questions and answer session. There will be many very interesting topics which that our panelists will bring up, and they are highly relevant not only from the business perspective, policy, but also for us, scholars and researchers. Many fascinating research fields that we can explore also based on the discussion. So let's move to the next slides about CHERN. We are a China in Europe Research Network. We are a platform, exchange platform, interdisciplinary exchange platform of researchers, academics, professionals, policymakers, to better understand presence of China in Europe. We focus on 5 or 6 main topics which are highly relevant for Europe. You can also learn more about CHERN, of course, from our website. I hope already many of you are CHERN members. If you are not, I let you also check different topics that we discuss and join 1 or 2 working groups to advance the research agenda all together. CHERN relates to European Union, is founded by European Cooperation, Science and Technology. So now let's move to our distinguished speakers. I'm very happy again to welcome you, Leong See Wong and Miljan Radunovic. Leong See Wong is experienced in the finance and supply chain management, and we connected together during Miljan's short-term scientific mission in Switzerland. In September, Miljan Radunovic visited us in Switzerland, in Yverdon-les-Bains, where we worked on this topic for 1 week. And we very much appreciate the short scientific mission instrument which supported financially Miljan with a grant to come and work with us. And we had also, during this period of time in September, interesting exchanges with Leong See Wong, with Miljan Radunovic, and our another colleague, Güldem Kara Mustafa, who works together with me on the topic. Leong See Wong has long expertise in finance, supply chain management, and she's very much she very much works with both Chinese firms, but also local stakeholders collaborating on Chinese, often also infrastructure investments. Miljan Radunovic has experience in Belt and Road Initiative, and has worked on different infrastructure projects in Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe. Miljan is based in Serbia, and he is a practitioner, but also a scholar working on a PhD on this topic. So we can learn on the both practice insights from his discussion. And let's move on to the discussion. I leave the floor to my colleagues, Leong See Wong and Miljan Radunovic.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, everyone, for time set aside for this webinar. We'll try to make it as as useful and as insightful as possible. So we will cover 3 topics, myself and my colleague. The first one is lessons learned and the learning process. This comes from both my academic research and the research I have done with Professor Anna, and my experience of working with some of the leading Chinese companies in Southeast Europe and Central Eastern Europe. So regarding the Belt and Road and general the role and presence of China in Europe so far, looking at the numbers, we can see that especially when it comes to financial institutions, experience has shown us that risks need to be shared. If we could sort of set aside 2 categories, 2 types of investments, Chinese investments in Europe that have been taking place, we would see construction projects, so that this would be EPC projects, engineering, procurement, and construction projects, and mergers and acquisitions, M&As. Looking at the success rate and the efficiency of the whole thing, numbers really paint a very different picture than the general impression. Especially in Southeast Europe, efficiency of capital infrastructure investments has been questionable, to say the least. Whereas the M&A participation of Chinese companies in M&A in Western Europe has been more on the positive side. The most recent Rhodium Group and Merrick's report shows as you can see on the slide, the amount of funding that went in certain countries, and this is very indicative of the supporting measures and the environment which favors these kinds of finances. When it comes to financial institutions and their way of operating and their way of addressing the market, the Chinese ones, as they are the ones who sort of set the line for the Chinese companies to play their role here. We have learned that there is an importance of stakeholder assessment, meaning that Chinese companies have shown there's been a need to know the market rules in order to be successful in the specific market. And the M&A examples show that this is crucial and this is important, whereas the examples of, especially in Southeast Europe, projects being developed and being breaking the budget, breaking the schedule, show that these parameters are very important when planning and executing a project. Also, rules apply to all or need to be read. This is an issue which I face very often when working with Chinese companies on their development projects, especially infrastructure ones in this part of Europe. The fact that Chinese companies come with a very successful rate of capital infrastructure projects which were developed not in Europe gives them huge confidence, and then they face the fact that rules, though transparent, are different than the ones they had faced in previous markets. When it comes to the learning process, this is something that Professor Anna and I have been very diligently assessing and stressing the importance of the learning process, both for the European side and for the Chinese side. For both sides, it is when you look at the numbers, the learning curve should be better. It's slow and demotivating given the impact that the cooperation could have and should have, aside of the external developments on the global level in the past 20 years. I would just mention within the report that we have devised examples of successful acquisitions, for example, in the car industry and appliances industry in the Nordic countries and the Benelux countries, as well as in Southeast European countries, whereas we had unsuccessful M&As in let's say metals mining and processing industries in Southeast Europe, and this all came as a result of the not being prepared for what you're getting yourself into when engaging in an M&A. Very similar thing happened with EPC contracts, where we had our research, which we did in Switzerland, concerned an analysis of a Chinese company which was engaged in two projects of very similar types, roads and bridges. In one case, everything went fine, and in the other case, nothing went well. And it was the same Chinese company. So we were trying to prove that it's not only on the Chinese side. We need to have a balanced capacity of management potential if you're getting yourself into a project with Chinese companies, in a big project with Chinese companies. Leong See, it's your turn now.
Okay. So yeah, the learning process, I do agree with Miljan that the market rules really do apply. I do have a similar experience actually about, especially towards a Chinese company that are much more successful that is outside Europe, and they felt that what they did outside could be mimicked into Europe, which I think it's a fatal mistake because every market is different. But yeah, for me, what is also important is the wasting of resources, financing of non-economic projects, which I think many people have read about it these days, about ports that are not used, highways to nowhere, that is, I mean, this is not new. It's also happened during the 90s, I think, in Japan, to just build infrastructure for the sake of infrastructure. So what I would say is that the benefit to the cost ratio, that is important for all financial institutions when you come to financing projects, not only for FIs, but also for any governments involved. And and also the responsibility of the want and need. One country could tell you, we want this and want this, but the most important thing is that you must also remember, do you need it? That's why I came up, I thought about the bartender rule. When you go to the bar and you drank too much and he doesn't think that you can do it, and he'll say, I think it's enough for today. I think for a lot of companies, even for governments, I think that is a rule that we all have to think about. And for especially Chinese companies that are in I think get bad names for financing projects that are, I think they're not going to be able to pay back. The country's not going to pay back. I think this is maybe a good way of maybe balancing the want and the need of the country. And of course, also comes with the debt issues is also the investments issue, where the collaterals does not the value of it is below what the liabilities would be, and therefore being not a very, very good investment for any FIs. And basically, in the unstable parts of the world, I think that way you have to countermeasure the risk that is involved. So I think what good thing about Chinese FIs is that I like the way that they think long term, not in the usual 5 years, 10 years. I think they think about it about 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I love the way they think. It's not going to be what you need now, but what you would need in the future. That I think that is a very, very good plus point on their side. And like Miljan said, know the market. I have came across a lot of construction companies that are building on the BRI that says, we can do it like this in somewhere in Sudan, in Ethiopia. why can't we do this in Europe? I said, because this is not Sudan, this is Europe. And even in Europe itself, what you can do in maybe in Germany, you most likely cannot even do in Switzerland, So, I mean, we are talking about neighbors here. We're not even talking about Eastern and Western Europe, and that's another story, So know the market, do your due diligence. I think not only for infrastructure, for any type of investment into companies, into projects, always do your due diligence, And for that fact, I would also like to say that this is really, for infrastructure projects, this is really not a one-man effort. I think a very good, I think in a utopia world, we should have a joint effort, to fund and manage all BRI projects. I have came across countries when I talk to them and they say, oh, no worries, if the EU doesn't finance us, we go to the Chinese. And if they don't finance us, we go to the Americans. And, each of us are fighting for the same thing, trying to manage projects to make the world a better place. I think if we just join the resources, there will be less waste and it will be done faster. And, in the end, I think really, really, it's just a joint effort from everybody. Miljan?
Okay. So next, yeah, I couldn't have said it better. Now moving on to the, as Leong See said, the untapped opportunities. And when you see the untapped opportunities, you need to focus on the biggest obstacle, how to use the untapped opportunities. Leong See mentioned very good cooperation in between the two big systems. So again, this is me saying from personal experience and professional experience and knowing the developments and the environment in Southeast Europe, in the non-EU countries. For example, there is a huge there's a huge overlap in the scope of work of Chinese companies with, when I say Chinese companies, this means priorities set by Chinese financial institutions to be supported, for the support to be provided to Chinese companies for projects to be executed. So there's a scope of work overlapping the scope of work of the European financial institutions. So this is, as Leong See said, it's not only about, it's what we've actually discussed. It's not only about doing the right thing, it's doing the right thing the right way. And we have examples of Chinese financial institutions providing support for the same things, literally the same things that, for example, European financial institutions are providing. Instead, for these two verticals, both in the financial part and in the execution part, to be communicating in between themselves in order to share the knowledge for the purpose of increasing the knowledge, they stick to their own lane. And it's up to us, people like Leong See and myself as a researcher, to show that this is wrong and to instruct them to talk in between themselves, to communicate, to exchange information, because it'll be beneficial for both sides. In specific, now me coming from a non-EU member country, this means that you have European funding for infrastructure projects, for things that could be done by thousands of Chinese companies. I say thousands because there's so many of Chinese companies, very qualified, and they are not doing that. Going back to what Leong See said and what we've agreed on, you need to know where you're stepping into if you want to finance your companies to be successful. But we always have an example of, you go into a city where you cannot, where tap water has high level of metals and you cannot drink tap water. It would only make sense for you to make a water treatment factory. It absolutely makes sense to do that. Anything but some other thing but that. And the thing that might be a Europe-China size issue, which China can use, even small wins, small scale successfully completed projects resonate a lot. They bring in a lot of positive image, regardless of the budget. From my experience, I know that when talking to Chinese companies and them setting their plans, annual plans and midterm, long-term plans, they always put a threshold. They say, we're doing projects of, I don't know, 10 million euros. Don't put the threshold like that, because you're used to putting that kind of a price tag in much bigger environments in Africa and Indonesia, in Asia. Focus on the size and the impact of the change you want to make. Don't focus on the number. That's what's important. Also, when it comes to obstacles, in this part of Europe, when you compare the numbers, you see, when you compare the numbers with the on my previous slide, you see that not that much of funding has reached this region compared to Western Europe, whereas the major funding in Western Europe was absolutely had no relation with any government-supported measures and similar mechanisms. So it was solely business to business, B2B connections. And I think this turns out to be a very significant problem when focusing on the efficiency and effectiveness, especially in infrastructure projects. We lack, especially in Southeast Europe, we lack the successful cooperation between businesses, as the role of the government is over-exaggerated. The government is there to set the laws, and you invite the politician just to cut the red tape, and that's it. The business should be left to business people, and I think this turns out, this so far has been a major obstacle, especially in Southeast Europe, as not that much of healthy M&A and investments have been unfolding in this region, aside of the G2G agreements. And definitely, finally, knowledge sharing and learning through mistakes. Learning through mistakes is, as Leong See said, you see, it's better to see someone fall and then you don't trip. But even if you trip once and then don't trip again. It hurts, but it's better to hurt once, to hurt your knee once and not over and over again. And this is, as we've discussed, this is the importance of sending the proper information upstairs from the executors, from the construction companies to the financial companies, financial institutions, saying it's not working this way. We need to change something. And the need for the change needs to be communicated properly in order for the change to be implemented for the purpose of having projects more successful, more efficient, and more effective in the future. Leong See, back to you.
So for me, I think the untapped opportunities would still be in the infrastructure and transportation area, because I think there is a big need, for, not only in the BRI area, I think everywhere in this world. I think the most important thing is also to work together on the UN SDGs, which is very important, I think, especially for myself. In this case of the BRI, I think it's more of the SDG 7 that came into my mind, which is the energy, you know. And these are the three things that I think would be the untapped opportunity that maybe every country and every in Europe and in China could think about, because I think these three things would be the major issues in the future. What I think is the biggest obstacle, not only for financial institutions, but also for governments and also for SMEs, would be the zero-sum bias mentality. What does that mean? Is that what it means is that, you know, in economics, there's a thing that says that if in order for one to win, the other must lose. That is the mentality here, you know. It's like, oh, for example, you know, EU might think that, oh, if China succeed in this, that means we lost. Or the other way around, China might think, oh, if Europe succeed in this, then we have lost. I don't think that should be the case. It can be I think everybody could be a winner, but it's just a matter of degree of, if you take 40%, I take 60, nothing ever is fair. I would say if it's almost fair, it would be acceptable, I think, for everybody. Yeah. Let's talk about infrastructure here. For infrastructure by 2040, according to the Global Infrastructure Outlook, the world is forecasted the gap would reach 97 trillion. Sorry, this is the amount needed to actually close the infrastructure gap around the world. I'm talking about maintenance, new infrastructure, and also to renew certain things. So currently there is a 19% of this cost. At this moment, it is unfunded, 18 trillion of it. And it's not in Africa, it's actually in Asia. Asia has the greatest infrastructure demand. It's also very difficult to build infrastructure. Just take Indonesia, for example, or Philippines. They are island countries, you know, to build infrastructure on these islands and in the tropical jungle. Let me put it this way, it's a major undertaking. And they themselves would require 52 trillion by 2040. So imagine the 97 trillion, out of that, 52 must go to Asia. It's not Africa, as we all might think, it's actually Asia. So to bridge this complex and the problem with this is also because due to the growing geopolitical frictions that we all see, that we all know, I hope everybody knows that is going on. I think this actually increases the cost of the projects, because then you know, everybody is working on their own agenda, you know, that costs a lot of project timelines, lengthening of project timelines, and of course the restriction of the investment exports, as we can see at this moment, and the competition for influence. You know, I think all these are the biggest obstacle in any projects, not let alone the BRI projects. Yeah, Miljan, back to you.
Okay. So, as you've mentioned, and as we've commented previously, finding a common denominator, finding some area in which we agree jointly is our starting point, not our ending point. And as you said, I love the zero-sum metaphor. And as we've also concluded, that the knowledge is more than the sum of its particles. So the true value of the past decade of China's investment experience in Europe is the knowledge both sides have gained, not only for future investments in Europe, but also for future investments of both sides somewhere else, individually, or even better, together. And when we're talking numbers, we're talking Asia, and we're talking about the RCEP and the ASEAN potential. And the beauty of the knowledge is that knowledge is replicable. So, and it constantly grows. Both European and Chinese companies, communities, and environments should harness the lessons learned from the previous decades. This especially goes to the financial institutions, to see what went wrong and what were the roots of inefficiency and ineffectiveness of projects from the investment planning perspective, in order for these not to repeat themselves in new projects, which might be of even greater scale. And if we're talking about greater scale, we're talking about RCEP, because it would make sense to repeat the mistakes in the ASEAN market in the next 10 years, to repeat the mistakes of the previous 10 years. It would make sense to learn from the previous 10 years and make improvements in the next decade. The global business is developing in such a fast-paced way that we will definitely be seeing joint development of European and Chinese companies. I would very much welcome that. And with ASEAN and in Africa, I must come back to my neighborhood, where there is a huge necessity for infrastructure investments, where both the knowledge and the skills and the expertise of both sides, Chinese and European ones, can contribute, can benefit the local communities, but also to the parties involved. Investment management and project management evolves, maybe faster than some people would like, but it evolves. And the thing is that the investment planning as well as project management needs to be adapted, introducing some new methodologies, something like project cycle management or reference class forecasting. And for the purpose of this to be done, parties need to exchange expressions, to have feedbacks on their own work, on other parties' work, in order to be better. Improving cross-sectoral and cross-cultural cooperation is very important in order to lay good and solid and reliable grounds for all of what we're talking about to happen. This means more of communication, of transparent, result-oriented cooperation supported by both sides. We have very good examples of communication platforms which bring together different kinds of stakeholders, both in Europe and in China, the likes of CHERN, of Enrich China, and similar ones. And these are just the tip of the iceberg compared to the potential there is. A language barrier is a huge problem, because it's one thing to go to Shanghai and to Beijing and to talk business and to talk development projects, but you should go more inland where the need is greater, but the language barrier is bigger. The language barrier, I've experienced language barrier within the companies. And this is also, as trivial as it might sound, it is a big obstacle which we need to overcome. And I think, for example, technology is one tool that will be helping us do this in the upcoming period. Okay, Leong See, back to you.
I agree with Miljan. Actually, the potential is definitely in the RCEP region. It's most of the country in ASEAN is really up and coming. I mean, look at how far Vietnam has come, to be honest. I mean, I went back there again. I did not even recognize it at all. You know, it's like when I went to China in the late 90s and I went back again. Seriously, I could not even recognize it. But and also in Africa, I think most of these regions where, you know, the infrastructure were built during the colonial times, they were built for the benefits of the colonial powers, because it's like it's not to think about how you want to work with the other countries. It's more like, how do I get the stuff to the port? And I talked to many countries before, and then they said, you know, it's great that you know, the EU is coming in, and the Chinese, and to some degree the American with US aid, to help to build this you know, this infrastructure to connect all the countries, or even the country itself. You know, they told me it took them maybe 6 hours maybe 2 years ago just to get from one area to the other in the same country, and now just takes maybe 2 hours. So I think that is a very good step ahead for all these countries. I think the potential is definitely there. For myself, I think shaping global sustainable future together, what I think is that every company, every government should be effective, as in the sense that understanding what is economically important. Like I said, you know, like I was talking to one government in Africa, and they said, you know, it was so important for us that this road was built by the Chinese that finally connects us to another country, you know, because they have no port. And you know, the other one used to be French, and the other one used to be English, so there was no connection. And now they built this connection, and they are very grateful, I think, to understand what is economically important to a country, and the needs and the wants. Like I say, you must be able to balance it and focus on the sustainable development, because to build something is easy, but is it sustainable? What is the point of building this? What do you want to achieve at the end? It's not just building something for the sake of building. Do they need it? I mean, they can want it, but I mean, I want to have a Mercedes-Benz too, but do I need it? I mean, I want it, you know? So in that sense, for a country, it's the same, yeah? And I think I'm a very firm believer in connecting knowledge. What it means is that you have this knowledge and the other one has the other knowledge. Like all these universities, you know, one has this, nobody is a jack of all trades. There will always be master of none. So one is the master of this, the other one is master of that. If they work together and build something, you know, like there's this, I can give you an example in Kenya that we are trying to build in a circular economy. We don't bring in just only the European companies. We bring in the SMEs, the FIs, you know, we also bring in the Chinese, whoever does the work best, you know, working together to build these economies around the BRI, but also in EU, we can learn from it. That's the funniest thing is that we were doing this project and then they say, you know what, if this project succeeds in Africa, what is it to say that we cannot bring this back to EU? We can export this back. So think about it. It's about working together to create a better world. I think communicate better. This is the next step. Intergovernmental, financial institutions, small, medium enterprises. All these, they are required for, a good infrastructure project is not only a one big company. It also involves all these small little companies that you don't see. It's like building a car, you know, it might be a Honda, it might be a Mercedes, might be a BMW, but who are the ones that bring the components? I'm a big advocate of SMEs. They are the ones that you don't see, you know, but the things that you use every day, you know, they are the ones that build it for you. So remember that, yeah. So to communicate better between the SMEs, which I think is very good that in Europe we have the SME Connect to be a voice of these SMEs. And I know that in China they have also similar things. And to scale it further. When you have all these three on the top, then you would be able to scale it further and to build lasting bridges. So what I meant by lasting bridges is that, you know, not only in terms of infrastructure, it's about building. When you work together, you know, with one country and the other, with one government with the other, one company with the other, you build lasting bridges, because to build a business, you must need trust. When you have that trust, you build the bridge that lasts. You know, that's my two cents on it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Anna, back.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Leong See Wong and Miljan Radunovic, for this very insightful discussion with many different interesting areas that we also as scholars could also jointly investigate in our CHERN network. I would like to invite all participants to the Q&A session. You can write your questions in the chat and or raise your hand and ask questions to the two panelists. So floor is yours, dear participants. We will also maybe stop recording the session so that we can also have a more of the discussion.